What does it mean to be truly seen when the world only sees what it wants to believe? Elena stood at the edge of the funeral parlor, her fingers tracing the worn edge of her black dress. The air was heavy with the scent of lilies and murmured condolences, but the whispers cut sharper than any grief. "She's only here for the money," someone hissed from the pews. "Hasn't spoken to him in years." The words stung, each one a blade twisting in her chest. She hadn't come for money. She'd come to say goodbye to the man who'd shaped her, even if he'd broken her too. Her father, Thomas, had been a complicated man. A carpenter with hands that could craft miracles from wood but couldn't hold his family together. Elena remembered the good days, him teaching her to carve tiny animals from cedar, his laughter warm as a summer evening. But those days faded when her mother left, and Thomas buried his pain in whiskey. Elena, barely a teenager, became a ghost in her own home, invisible to a father who saw only his bottle. At 17, she'd left, carrying nothing but a backpack and a heart full of scars. Now, at 28, she stood in this room of strangers, distant relatives, old friends of her father, all eyeing her with suspicion. They didn't know the nights she'd called him, leaving voicemails he never answered. They didn't know the letters she'd sent, returned unopened. To them, she was the runaway daughter, back to claim a piece of whatever Thomas had left behind. The weight of their judgment pressed against her, but she kept her chin high, her eyes fixed on the oak casket at the front. The service was brief, a blur of eulogies that painted Thomas as a saint. Elena's throat tightened as she listened, wishing she could share her own the story of love tangled in pain, of a father who'd tried but failed. When the priest called for final words, she stayed silent. What could she say that they'd believe? Then came the will. The lawyer, a wiry man with wireframe glasses, stood at a podium, his voice steady but thin. The room leaned forward, anticipation thick as fog. Elena felt their eyes on her again, waiting for proof of her greed. She braced herself, expecting nothing. Thomas had barely acknowledged her in life. Why would death be different? Thomas Michael Reed's estate, the lawyer began, is to be distributed as follows. He cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. To my sister, Margaret, I leave my tools and workshop, so she may continue the craft we loved. Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. Margaret, red-eyed, nodded from her seat. To my friend, Samuel, I leave my savings to support the community center he runs. More nods, a few soft claps. Elena's heart sank, not for the money, but for the confirmation she'd been erased from his life. She stared at her hands, the calluses from her own carpentry work a faint echo of her father's. And to my daughter, Elena Reed. The lawyer continued, his voice cutting through the room's hum. Every head turned. Elena froze, her breath catching. I leave my house, my land, and my collection of carvings, with one condition. She must complete the unfinished sculpture I began, as a testament to the bond we shared, however broken. The room erupted in whispers, shock twisting into disbelief. Elena's mind reeled. A house, land, carvings? She hadn't known he'd kept anything of hers, let alone a sculpture. The lawyer held up a hand, silencing the crowd. Thomas left a letter for Elena, to be read aloud. He unfolded a single sheet of paper, his voice softening. Elena, he read, I failed you. I let my demons win, and I lost the only thing that mattered me, daughter. You were always stronger than me, braver. The sculpture in the shed, its USA father and daughter, carved from the same cedar we used when you were small. I couldn't finish it, because I couldn't face what I'd done. If you're hearing this, I hope you'll try. Not for me, but for you. I'm proud of you, always was. I'm sorry. Tears blurred Elena's vision. The room was silent now, the weight of Thomas's words settling over everyone. She felt the stares shift, no longer sharp but uncertain, some even ashamed. Margaret reached for her hand, squeezing gently. Samuel nodded from across the room, his eyes kind. Elena didn't want the house or the land. She wanted the father who'd written that letter, the one who'd seen her, even if too late. Days later, she stood in his shed, the air thick with sawdust and memory. The sculpture was there, half formed, a father holding a girl's hand, their faces rough but unmistakable. Her hands trembled as she picked up a chisel, the weight familiar, grounding. She worked through the nights, carving not just wood but pieces of herself, grief, anger, love. Each stroke was a conversation she'd never had, a chance to forgive. When she finished, the sculpture stood proud, a testament to a bond that had endured, however broken. She didn't keep the house. She sold it, giving the money to Samuel's community center, where kids like her could learn to carve, to create, to heal. At the center's opening, she placed the sculpture in the garden, a quiet tribute. A child ran up, tracing the figures with tiny fingers. "Who's this?" she asked. Elena smiled, her voice steady. "It's a father and daughter, learning to hold on."